In this video, we are taking your questions today. It is an Orange Grove 55 Q&A up next.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
to all who come to this happy place,
welcome to Orange Grove 55.
Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to another Q&A OG 55 style. I brought my brothers, my good friends with me today to answer your questions. Right over here, we got Dr. Dre, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on the channel. Vash Sky, welcome back, brother.
Thank you, sir. I do appreciate the intro there. I love that. It gets me so hyped. Yeah, in incognito form, but still very much present. I do appreciate you having me on. Hey, if you want to go ahead and follow me, it's going to go ahead and be at the bottom of my avatar right there. Type it into Twitter, and you should see the avatar that's wigging out right now on Twitter, and that's going to be my account. So if you want to go follow me, you can go ahead and do so right there. And if you want to see me, usually, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. However, looks like we're going to be able to be seeing us on another platform as well under the same moniker on Rumble. So you can go ahead and do that as well right there. Orange Grove 55, look that up, should pop up. Some exclusive content, stuff we can't show or talk about on YouTube. Also, too, a repository for all of our videos, so you can follow us there as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are now on Rumble. One video is already over there. Now it's a video that we already have here on on our YouTube channel. But yeah, like Dre mentioned, the more risque, I guess, more controversial topics, we'll go over to Rumble for obvious reasons. So that is the big news today. But down below, we got D Family Man 23, host of our Walt Disney World show here on the channel, Citrus Corner. George, welcome back, my man.
Thank you. Glad to be back and ready to answer some viewer questions. I love these. I love these ones that anytime I have the opportunity to do so, I love to be a part of it. But anyway, you could find me down below on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And as OG had pointed out, you can find me on this channel at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's dive right into your questions. All right. So the first question, actually, CSRS always brings the heat when he asks, anytime Q&A comes around, CSRS always crushes it, absolutely crushes it. So there's 3 questions and each one is fantastic. So we're going to dive into all 3. So CSRS, first question. D23 2022 came and went despite all of the rumors. No new Tomorrowland was announced for Disneyland. Do you think a reason for that could be with Disneyland Forward starting the approval process in 23, Disney has decided to pivot and focus on DCA first as it needs more work / new attractions more than Disneyland, cough, cough, Hollywoodland. So here's the thing, CSRS. We've already seen, yeah, I think Forward definitely is something that there is part of this equation. We've already seen how these projects, these expansion projects affect things in the park. You mentioned, DCA. I mean, the Eastern Gateway project directly impacted where they put Avengers Campus. When that whole Eastern Gateway got knocked down by the city, Disney had to kind of recalibrate those plans, and then they ended up, kind of settling on where Bugs Land used to be, right? Because it was supposed to be over there by like Monsters Inc. and what have you, and going to expand outward. But since that Eastern Gateway didn't happen, they had to move it. It's very possible what you're mentioning here in regards to a new Tomorrowland. Maybe some of these Tomorrowland plans hinge on that Disneyland Forward thing going through, it's possible. It's very possible. This is like one big puzzle, and each piece affects the other. But Dre, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on what CSRS is asking?
Each piece does affect the other, and I think Disneyland Forward could have certainly had an effect. I'm not saying that it couldn't have. For the obvious reasons you mentioned, and the Eastern Gateway project in Hollywoodland, a lot of people don't, they forget that connection. By the way, nice mug, sir. Do appreciate it. got the Oswald representing. I love it. But a lot of people forget about the connection between Eastern Gateway and how that affected Hollywoodland, the position of Avengers Campus, and so forth. I think it's a really important thing to bring up. But I think in the very distinct case of Tomorrowland, I think what had more to do with that specific situation, two things. I think one is the liquidity issues as created by the instances of 2020 and beyond, right? So when you lose, so many of your revenue generating platforms like theatrical distribution and your theme parks are closed and so forth, that, there are more important things to address than Tomorrowland. I think the other thing, too, is the severe loss of talent that we've seen at WDI. A lot of people who were responsible and in charge of the Tomorrowland project, like Joe Rohde, for example. We knew that he was attached to whatever was going to happen with Tomorrowland at Disneyland. Well, now he's gone. So how do you recoup that, right? And I just don't think the company was necessarily in a position to elaborate on Tomorrowland at this time. Doesn't mean that they're not going to. I think they do have plans to, but it's just on the low list of priorities when you look at everything else, and that might include Disneyland Forward.
And Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. It's like a one big giant puzzle, but it's also like Jenga. You keep on moving pieces around, and you move one false piece, and the whole thing goes down. And it's like, aside from just talking about Tomorrowland, but if you go to the other side of Disneyland Park, where they're going to be closing down Splash Mountain and possibly all of Critter Country,
right,
that you're already going to have that side pretty much shut down. And it's, Splash Mountain is a very popular attraction. It's a people eater. So to have that whole section closed, and then you're going to have Tomorrowland closed on for however long, or certain sections blocked off. And, with Toontown reopening, with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which now by today's time of this video is now January 27th. But that, we had talked about this on the channel, where Toontown would have to kind of forge in through Galaxy's Edge to kind of create more of walkway breathing room, because it's such bottleneck towards that back part of the park. So until that possibly occurs, you would then have north of the park, east and west, with Tomorrowland and Critter Country being closed on. That I think it would just create a debacle right now. And I think like one thing has to happen before the other. And I think that their main focus is Critter Country and getting Toontown up. And then with Disneyland Forward, I think they're going to, as CSRS had mentioned, I think they're going to more so focus on DCA more, because I think that park needs it more than Disneyland. And then I think in time they'll focus more on Tomorrowland.
So true, George.
100%. Yeah, there's so much going on right now that need to kind of take precedent over a new Tomorrowland. And not to say a new Tomorrowland isn't needed, not to say a new Tomorrowland isn't important. It absolutely is. But like George mentioned, like the whole thing with Splash Mountain has to be addressed first. Critter Country and all that connected to that attraction needs to be addressed first. You can only have so much of the park down at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Or you start to really affect operations and what have you. So absolutely. So that's CSRS's first question. Number two is Jack from DSNY Newscast said a factor for why the original Quinjet ride system for the Avengers ticket from DCA was cut is due to Imagineering not being able to get the ride system to perform to the way they wanted. Do you think some variant of the original Quinjet ride system could eventually see the light of day in another attraction? Dre, what are your thoughts? Could we see some iteration of this in some other attraction, maybe even incorporated into the multiverse ride? What are your thoughts?
A good idea never dies at Disney. I mean, we've heard and seen that and have seen the fruits of that time and time again in Disney history. And so I think it's pretty likely that we'll see a version of it, maybe one somewhere else, or even in Avengers Campus if they ever expand. They go, maybe they expand in Hollywoodland, right? And they want a second go at that Quinjet attraction, and hey, maybe the technology comes to a point where they can actually implement it fully. You never know with these things. But I Imagineering seemed pretty hyped about it, and it seemed pretty ambitious. I wouldn't be too surprised to see it make its way in the parks in some form.
Yeah, and we've even seen at DCA like old ideas resurrect in the form of Luigi's flying tires. I mean that same technology or iteration of that used to be the flying saucers in Tomorrowland from like the 1960s, I believe.
1961 through 1966 to be precise.
There we go. So that was resurrected all those years later. Absolutely, like Dre said, good ideas never die at Disney. But George, what are your thoughts on that?
I think honestly, it's one of the factors that isn't really surprising at Disney. You always get this kick-ass concept, and then it just kind of dwindles down into something that is, very easily replaceable. Based on the concept art that they gave us at the expo, you can kind of see it's more like of and I don't know, Disney didn't confirm it, but it has like that kind of type of ride vehicle that the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man has, mixed with Transformers at Universal. I don't know that for sure, but that's what the ride vehicle looks like. I think that they hyped up this type of ride technology from the previous expo, and I think that if Disney wants to do it, I applaud them to actually wait than just give us something half-ass. That if what they described to us from the last expo of what the original Quinjet ride was supposed to be, I'd rather them take their time, work on the bugs and the kinks, and then give us something, whether it's something else in Avengers Campus or it may be part of the Disneyland Forward expansion with another whole land, with another whole IP. I'm okay with that, as long as if you're going to do something that ambitious, go all the way.
With the headaches that Rise of Resistance has given operations and Disney management as a whole, I can kind of see how reliability might be the word of the day going through the halls of WDI right now. So doesn't surprise me.
No, yeah, absolutely. You need reliability, and from what I understood, also capacity was a major issue for that ride system. It wasn't really meeting that benchmark that the suits in Burbank were demanding of it, and that's a big factor. You can't have an attraction with really bad capacity, and the lines are going to be like 6 hours long. I mean, that's the thing. These are real things that have to actually funnel people through fairly fast. So you might have a great concept, a really cool idea, but if it doesn't check all the boxes in regards to logistics and operations, well, then it's probably not the best to put into the park. It has to kind of be a cool idea, but also work logistically and not, so there's a lot at play here. So, but yeah, like these gentlemen have said, and I also agree, I think eventually we will probably see some version of it. Maybe they can improve upon that idea, and we'll see some version of it down the road. You never know.
Never know.
Third question from CSRS is, Disney usually likes to clone rides / lands. If the Blue Sky Villains Land happens at Magic Kingdom and were to eventually make its way to Disneyland Resort, do you think it would go in Disneyland or DCA? CSRS, I would not want to see this land in DCA. I mean, and look, I know a lot of people get on this park. Oh, well, what does the park have to do with California? Look, the park has a lot to do with California. They take California locales, Los Angeles, Piers, Route 66, what have you, and they just insert Disney IP into those locales, right? So it's IP, but it's still California. Well, the villains have nothing to do with California. Literally, there's no way to tie that into California at all. I mean, I guess you can kind of throw them into Hollywood land, but then you're not really doing villains that their proper justice.
Right.
I mean, they really do require kind of at least some amount of space for a really impressive attraction or area. So no, DCA is not the park for villains. Absolutely should go in Disneyland, and it should absolutely be like a subland, maybe like a mini land that's connected to Fantasyland, in my opinion. But Dre, what do you think? Villains coming to Disneyland Resort?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer that. I mean, if you can't do the Frozen stuff, over in kind of the area that we all kind of suspect it being in, which is kind of the northern end of Tomorrowland, adjacent to Small World. I think that's where Villains Land should be, or somehow connected to Fantasyland. I think that's the proper way to go about it, and it looks like that's what they're gonna do with Walt Disney World, as we've seen and broken down the concept art in previous videos on this channel. However, my thinking was it'd be a great land for a third gate.
There you go.
Let's not discount that either.
100%, Mr. Family Man. I know you've been really bullish on a Villain's Land over in Florida. What are your thoughts in regards to it coming to Disneyland Resort? Where would you put it?
The first thing is, being that you mentioned that, OG, it's not if the Blue Sky Villains Land, it's when. I have to have a reason to lay my head down on the pillow and sleep soundly. So it's when it actually happens.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That I echo what you guys say, and I agree with Dre. I think for Disneyland, I think that would be an awesome third gate. Aside from your petition, OG, for the Westcott, if they can't do Westcott, do the Villains. But I echo what Dre says. If it was to go into Disneyland, do north of Tomorrowland, that segues into the Fantasyland Theater. That's a whole chunk of real estate that I personally don't think they need. And I think it would be a great addition to add the Villains Land to kind of encompass around Fantasyland, excuse me, because then Disneyland's Fantasyland is so storybook-esque compared to Walt Disney World, so it would be only fitting to put it in that area. And as you said, OG, if definitely would have to be Disneyland over DCA. There's no rhyme or reason why you would put the villains in something that is representation of California.
Right. Completely agree. So the next question comes from our friend Elgo, and Elgo is asking, do you think Disney will ever go back to building non-IP lands and revisit the idea of creating generic theme lands like Frontierland and Fantasyland, where they would have more flexibility to insert various IP into one land? Well, thank you, Elgo, for this question. Do I think that Disney will ever go back to building non-IP lands? Here's the thing with the IP lands. This is a trend that was really spearheaded by Universal. When Universal had enormous success with Wizarding World, it just set a whole trend in the industry in motion. And that's where we're at right now. That's why we're seeing Toy Story Land and Star Wars Land and this land and Frozen Land, and that it's because of Wizarding World. For better or worse, that's the reason why. And I think that eventually, look, like all trends, things ebb and flow and change and, and evolve. I do think eventually these theme park companies, the trend will move in some other direction, eventually. I think that this current thing right now, which is dedicating entire lands and all this acreage just to one property, I think is a very now thing. Now, IP in general in the parks is a thing that is going to last for a very, 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 very long time. But what I'm saying is this trend of building an entire land in these theme parks based around just one property, I think that in particular is a trend. And I think that is something that will definitely change. I think it's not really, first of all, it's not really sustainable. Theme parks are very finite places. It's not like a Disney Plus that you can just throw content in there endlessly. When with a theme park, you have limited amount of room to work with. And when you're dedicating, 15 acres to your park for one franchise, it's not exactly the smartest thing in the world when you can have a more vague land and insert many IP into that land. So I do think that these companies will sort of go back in that direction. It is very much a trend started by Universal, but it's not something that I see staying, long term, like 15, 20 years from now. I just don't see it. But Dre, what are your thoughts? Am I off base? Where you kind of stand with it?
No, I don't think you're off base at all. I mean, and Disney had its own, I guess, aspirations for a themed land in the form of Cars Land. Even before what is it, Wizarding World of Harry Potter 1.0 at Islands of Adventure even debuted in 2010. So yeah, it's definitely a trend, and I would agree with you. Definitely started by Universal for sure. And for the reasons that you say, I do agree with you. I think the other point to that is it limits your expansion as well. So when you go into this realm of like, we're going to have these themed lands, and they're going to be so expressly, immersive and singular to an IP, it does limit like what rides you can even build in these things. You have a point between Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and Toontown that you could fill with just about anything, but you're kind of limited. I was thinking about this in the villains context. I was like, would that fit? And it's like, well, no, there's just not really a whole lot of land left. So you really have to either do one or the other. You have to either expand Mickey's Toontown, which is unlikely, or go with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And that's kind of one of the things that kind of limits creativity in a way when you dedicate so much real estate to those things. So I do think that they'll go back to generic themed lands, and they're kind of doing that right now. I mean, look at Epcot. You have World Discovery, World Nature, World Celebration, right? That's coming relatively quickly. And it used to be all of Future World. It used to have kind of a cohesive theme, but it was broad enough to have a plethora of different attractions and shows and things within it. And they have maintained that. They've split it up a little bit, but they've maintained that kind of format going forward there, and I think that's for a reason. In order to slot in a Guardians of the Galaxy or some other Nemo, some other IP, Moana, in there. So yeah, I they're already doing that today. I think that will be that'll come back in various forms as we go along here. But I think it'll be a mixture of these two things for sure.
Absolutely. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on this?
I do agree with that notion, Dre. My only thing is like with that, like with the neighboring hoods, like with World Discovery, World Nature, and everything. I think it's more so because they have a concept that they want to move forward because of the IPs. So because they want to add in Moana, there becomes the World Nature attached to living with the land and what have you. I think if it comes down to where you start from the ground up, where you just like lay out flat land and you start off from scratch, I think that's where Disney is kind of leaning more towards the direction of just IP only.
Absolutely.
For right now, I do agree that in time, in variations, I do feel like when it's needed, they will use it. But that's also the problem right now at Islands of Adventure over at Universal Orlando is they have a land, the Lost Continent. And even though it's semi-themed to like the Greek mythology with the Poseidon's adventure and Zeus and what have you, it's as you guys had mentioned, it's very limited of what they can do because there's so much that they can only add to the Greek mythology. Where if you have an IP that's very popular, that's very trending, and that is continuing by banging out more sequels to movies or television shows or anything on the streaming services, because that'll help out a lot too, then they have more product to go forth with said IP into the lands. And that's what they're waiting for with Pandora right now. They're waiting for the next movies to come out from James Cameron saying, there's a lot more to dive into, no pun intended, because the next one's about water, but, but that they can expand upon the world of Avatar after those movies come out.
100%. And our next question comes from BJ Vincent. And BJ is asking, with Disney announcing it is officially making a Figment movie, do you think this will give Disney the motivation and funding to upgrade the ride? Mr. Family Man, it seems like you're ready to answer this one. Go ahead. I'll start with you, sir.
Yes. Yeah, just like right after the expo, they decided to spring this one on us. By the way, we're having a Figment meet and greet, and then it segues into, we're having a movie. And I think Disney has in their minds to upgrade this attraction, but I only think as if the film is successful enough. And I think this is sort of kind of like a prototype sort of thing to really see the fan community of how much that they love and adore this character. Because I mean, based off of those popcorn buckets, it's flying out the door. And I mean, like anything with Figment merchandise in Epcot is very highly popular. And I think when you tie that in with the Figment meet and greet, because people went absolutely nuts for it, they're asking for an update to the ride. And now they're going to have this movie. I think Disney has a much bigger plan for Figment, and it's starting to really showcase through by them adding this. That's going to eventually lead to a complete redo of the ride, possibly based off of the movie, depending on, again, how successful it is in the streaming world goes.
What do you think, Vash? What are your thoughts on this?
I think this is a story of where the priority is for the company. I mean, Figment gets a movie before it gets a reimagined attraction, which everybody has been begging for ever since the 90s or early 2000s when it was actually redone. I mean,
that ties into the IP question that we were just talking about in a way.
In a way, yeah. And honestly, there were serious plans of an Inside Out redo of Journey into Imagination, and I think it was just consumer products, and the merch team in these parks that said, "Whoa, wait a minute." let's not act hasty, guys. I mean, we still need to have a prominent Figment presence in at least one of these parks because of how much they sell in merch. I mean, that was the thing that got Figment back into a leading role in the first place, following the first actual redo for this attraction. So, but with the studio, its ideas are limitless. We can throw any money, any amount of money towards these things. As much as we want, and even though relative to an attraction it is smaller, the kind of the cost of maintaining and staffing an attraction you don't have with a film. So it's kind of one of the things that liberates you to be a little bit more experimental, while also too it's just more resources going into the studio side of the equation. It's kind of really fascinating to see this kind of play out here. Seth Rogen, I think is going to be in it in some way.
Now that's Disney's plan. Now my personal viewpoints of the movie are going to have to be on hold until I actually see this thing, because I have some reservations about it myself. Yeah. That they just don't, as you had mentioned, Dre, that as a studio standpoint, that they're just not throwing it in there just to make for the almighty dollar, which obviously that's probably what it is. But I would love for them to have a backstory that shows the appreciation of the fan base that people have for this character, and that's what I want to see throughout the movie.
It's just weird because we haven't seen that reflected anywhere else.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the kind of strange thing to me. Go ahead, OG. I think you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say that this is a move. The Epcot diehards, the super fans as they call them, or the Disney super fans, they love Figment, right?
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the general public, most people don't know who this character is.
Yeah, I don't think this is driving that decision. I agree with you.
And that's why this is something that would just go straight to streaming. Like this won't even attempt to even hit a theater.
What I'm trying to say though is like, I think that's why the movie is coming first, because a movie introduces this character to the normies and makes it popular for the general public. It's not just going to be like an Epcot fanboy thing anymore. It'll be something that the general public will embrace. Now, once you get that movie out there and the general public and the normies embrace it, okay, now you have that kind of franchise capital to spend on the ride, because now you have the normies on board. Now, when you build the attraction, there's less risk because now everyone knows who this character is. They love it, assuming the movie is good. I'm going off of that assumption. So I think that's why they're sort of doing this, why they're sort of like, they're pumping it into the movie first, then they're going to put it into the park. The park is a very risky endeavor. Once you build these things, you're stuck with them for a long time. So that's why. And look, here's the thing too. I've been saying this for a long time about Oswald, or my boy Oswald. I've been saying this forever about Oswald. If Disney wants to move more Oswald merch, give him a show or something on Disney Plus, or give him a movie or something, so the general public is more aware of this character, you know? And then once you do that, then the character gains popularity. You can start doing more in the parks. And it looks like that's exactly what they're doing with Figment. Now, we'll see. It is a Seth Rogen thing. I think
that's my concern.
Yeah, he's a funny dude, but the problem with Seth Rogen is that my worry. Okay, this is my concern. As much as I love the Rescue Rangers movie, I thought it was really well done, really funny, but I feel like this Figment movie is going to go in that direction, because you don't get a Seth Rogen if you're going to be like a serious.
Yeah, if you're being reverential, I don't think so.
Right. Yeah, I think it's going to be like a Rescue Rangers. Now, I love Rescue Rangers. I thought that was a funny movie. Now, for that concept, it worked beautifully. Will that work for Figment? I don't know, but I think that's the direction they're going in. Something like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a difficult situation. OG, I mean, to your previous point about creating this kind of franchise capital in order to do the attraction. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but isn't that kind of a dual-edged sword as well? If this thing flops, nobody watches it. Right. Now it just confirms in the mind of every single executive who had taken pause in letting agreeing to the capital that is going to be necessary to redo the ride. It's like, oh well, okay, well there you go. Nobody wants to see this thing anyway. But they
could still capitalize on the merch, which that's what and then they just go back to that Epcot fanboy thing. So I think that's where they kind of have that sense of kind of being loose with Figment, is because they already have a substance groupie, so to speak, with diehard Disney fans, that if this does turn out to be a flop, they can still bank on him to just be that center icon character for Epcot.
It's just weird because Disney has not been, I think, super great in capitalizing on built-in audiences to the extent that they could be. And I see this going that way again. I could be wrong. I mean, it could be a surprise sleeper hit. It could end up like a Rescue Rangers, where it's like, people kind of had reservations about it before, but once they actually saw the film, it was like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty good here, and people kind of come around to it. I'm very nervous about this one, because this could set the Figment thing back.
Yeah, it could.
Years.
It could. And I agree with you in that sense, Dre, because honestly, a lot of the films that are coming out through the studios, even though that they could be semi-good or they could be really great, it's not enough people talk about it. It's like they talk about it when it's in the moment, when it's a premiere or what have you, and then you don't talk about it ever again. It doesn't have that memorable aspect of how Disney animation used to be, like with the Renaissance era and the Golden Age, where it's like you still go back and we talk about those films. But really, if you think about it, going off even with Rescue Rangers, I love the movie, but is anyone really talking about it after it premiered? No one really. It's all hush hush, and it's like even with, and I hate to say it, with Raya and the Last Dragon, a lot of people don't talk about it. In the moment they did, when it was fresh and new, and it's probably going to happen with Strange World. It's probably going to happen with, well, I can't really say with some of the other animations, because some of those look actually really, really cool. But some of the movies coming out, it's lackluster. And that's what I hope that they don't do with Figment.
Yeah, well, and to Dre's point too, you're absolutely right, Dre. Like it's a huge risk because Disney isn't 100% sold on it going all in on Figment. That's why the movie's happening first. Absolutely. Yep. And if this movie underperforms or doesn't really resonate with audiences, that doesn't bode well for Figment at Epcot at all. Now, like George said, you might get the popcorn buckets, you might get the Figment sippy cup and things like that because those are kind of cheap merchandise things that you can kind of throw out there for the super fans and they'll buy those up. But any real investment regarding Figment, I think would be, I don't know. I think that would be shot down pretty fast if this Figment movie doesn't perform. I'm worried about this movie. I'm just the thing is that Seth Rogen element that's really making me like, that's what's doing it for me. If some names were attached to it where I felt like this was going to be a serious attempt at bringing Figment to the big screen, some director or something that like has done like, maybe connected to like the Renaissance era of Disney or something, right? Or just like or Steven Spielberg or someone big, right? They're doing a Figment movie. I would be all in. I'd have faith in it. That Seth Rogen thing, it just screams Rescue Rangers to me. And look, like I said, I really, 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 really liked that movie, but that concept doesn't work for every single thing. And I think what kind of scares me is that Disney saw the success that Rescue Rangers had and goes, oh, okay, well, that'll work for this then. And that doesn't always apply. It doesn't always apply. So we'll see. I'll have an open mind with it because I had a lot of reservations with Rescue Rangers. Absolutely ended up loving it. So this Figment thing, it might be a comedy or something really goofy, but it might really work. We never know. But right out the gate, I'm nervous. I'm really nervous about it.
Yeah, and Seth Rogen tells me a couple of things. It tells me it's probably going to be on the comedy end, which if that is going to be the case, how much money are they going to really spend on it? It's they're probably going to limit their investment. It might be streaming only. And what does that imply just with that? I mean, it's I don't know. I'm very kind of unsure about it. It seemed like WDI was really going in the direction of restoring the attraction and get it to a point where it gave you a lot of the feels and restored the kind of original what is it sensation, I guess, that you got from the original incarnation of the attraction. And it seemed to me, at least with the sources that I had a number of years ago, that they were really kind of marching toward that direction. And I don't know. I think this might put that back, because the thing is, if it's really successful, then you have to base on the movie and whatever incarnation that movie takes, right? Whatever form that movie takes. But if it's a failure, then it gets pushed back even further, and we get farther from Imagineers who are really gung-ho about Figment.
And that's actually where it can go either way, because they're also planning on making an Inside Out 2. So if the film comes out before Inside Out 2 and it is a flop, then they may go back into Imagineering and say, hey, we were going to consider this to be Inside Out anyway. And with the promotion of Inside Out 2, let's just transform it into Inside Out, which I'm for sure that would be a really cool attraction. But as we were talking about, there goes Figment.
Now, the only thing that really helps in this instance when it comes to Inside Out is Pete Docter is a huge theme park fan. And I think he, knowing him, I don't think he was ever comfortable with replacing beloved character in the form of Figment and replacing the attraction outright with Inside Out. So that could be the only thing that could send those plans askew. But you're right, George. I mean, that's the dynamic playing out here.
Yeah, and it seems like this is a trend too, and it's not necessarily a bad trend. I mean, we see these kind of like Imagineering born IP like Figment, Society of Explorers and Adventurers. We've seen these kind of Imagineering born IP go from theme park into studio, and I think that's kind of a good trend to some degree, because it actually gives these properties, these really cool characters and IP, a chance to sort of become a little more mainstream, and we get to see more of them. It's a good thing, but it is also risky because you're kind of tinkering with something that's already kind of beloved amongst Parks fans, and you got Seth Rogen over here doing God knows what to Figment. We'll see. We will see. But Dre, George, I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today on this Q&A. A lot of fun. George, I'll start with you. If you let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, my friend.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you can find me here on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Very
Perfect.
sticky for sure. You can go ahead and follow me at Vash Guy on Twitter, right down there, right below the avatar right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. Now, OG, I do apologize. I forgot that we hadn't necessarily made the announcement for Rumble, so I just put that in my intro, and I thought, oh, no, we haven't formally announced it. OG, could you take it away just for a couple of minutes and explain what's going on there with Rumble?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, basically with Rumble, we just want to have another platform, another home for OG 55. You know, it's with YouTube, you never know, right? You never know. So it's always good to have a few platforms with your content. So what Rumble gives us that opportunity to have a second platform for the channel and our community and everything, which is fantastic. It also gives us opportunity to kind of dive into subjects that are maybe a little more controversial that we might not necessarily be able to discuss here on YouTube. So it is a fantastic kind of platform for all of that good stuff. We are officially on Rumble. We will be having Rumble exclusive videos. Like I mentioned, the more touchier subjects, things like that. And again, it'll all be in the theme park or even studio sphere. We're not going to get into like stuff way off the beaten path or anything,
Right.
but it might be topics that touch upon the theme parks and the studios that are a little bit more, touchy to discuss. So those will go on Rumble. Those will be Rumble exclusives. And you'll also see the regular content on Rumble, the videos like this that'll show up on Rumble as well. So exciting times indeed. And I want to thank everybody for watching today, this episode of OG 55. Now, if you want your question answered in a future Q&A, just comment down below with a question. And we pull regularly from the comment section or the community tab. You can go to the community tab and punch in your question there. Either way, we will definitely, we'll most likely pull your question and it'll be featured in a video. And it might even be its own video. Sometimes we take a question that's really, really meaty and there's a lot to discuss and we make an entire video out of it. So that is also something that we do on the regular. But to close it out,
It's been an honor serving with you all.
Yes.
thank you, Optimus, and thank you, Vash Guy and Disney Family Man. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.